She's humiliated simply because she doesn't have a child. At a crowded birthday party, surrounded by glitter and gossip, someone says out loud, "She's not even a real woman." No kids. What's she doing here? Laughter. Side eyes. Even the cake seems to mock her. She tries to stay quiet, tries to blend in. But the laughter turns cruel, louder, sharper, like knives, until her husband stands up, voice shaking, heart blazing, and says, "Enough!" The music swirled in soft crescendos. Crystal chandeliers shimmered overhead like stars caught in glass, dripping elegance from the ceiling of the Delane estate. Everything glowed, the champagne, the candles, the two white smiles. Laughter rang sharp like silver forks tapping fine bone china. The birthday party was for Margot Langston, society's beloved socialite, turning 45 with a guest list that looked more like a stock index than a friend circle. And amidst it all stood her, Clare, wearing a modest navy blue dress she had sewn herself. The seams tugged just slightly at her waist. Her shoes, scuffed at the toes. Hair, neatly pulled back with a pin her mother gave her. She wasn't ugly, just invisible in this world of silk and diamonds. Her husband, Daniel, had dragged her along. He worked with one of the Langston sons. A promotion was in the air, and networking was necessary. But Clare, she wasn't supposed to speak much. Just smile, sip the flute of sparkling water in her hand, and let the night pass. "I think that's her," one woman whispered. "Still no children, right? At her age?" Another muttered behind napkin, lips curled in a gleaming smile. Clare heard it. She always did. The way eyes flickered to her belly. The way hands gestured with pity, subtle, practiced pity, the kind they save for antique furniture and lonely dogs. She tried to laugh when they did, tried to swallow the shame like it wasn't a stone in her chest. Daniel, ever polite, ever well-spoken, didn't hear the whispers. Or maybe he pretended not to. "She looks tired," someone added. "Poor thing, can't even give him a child." Clare's grip tightened around the stem of her glass. It trembled just slightly. The bubbles inside fizzed like the boiling inside her throat. But she didn't speak. She had never made a scene. That wasn't her way. Until tonight. The ballroom door swung wider with a theatrical flourish. A hostess called for attention, her voice lilting with champagne confidence. "Everyone, Margot will be cutting the cake soon. But first, a few words from those closest to her. We'd love to hear from our beautiful guests and... Oh, Daniel, darling, why don't you say something? Bring your lovely wife up." Clare froze. No, not up there. Not on that stage with the golden mic and the rose gold candles. Her mouth went dry. Daniel chuckled, light-heartedly, giving her hand a soft tug. "Come on, love. Just a minute." She didn't move, but the crowd had already parted, eager and glittering. Phones half raised, wine glasses swaying. Clare walked like a ghost beside him, each step an echo in her chest. The marble floor felt too smooth, too exposed. The moment she stood under the spotlight, the room felt too warm. Her eyes blinked under brightness. "She's gonna faint," someone giggled. She always looked so fragile. Clare's heart slammed against her ribs like fists against a locked door. She wanted to disappear. But she smiled, faint, small, delicate. And that's when it happened. A woman in red, Margot's cousin Lila, clinked her glass and called out, loud, too loud, "Well, Clare, dear, maybe say something about motherhood. I mean, oh, forgive me, you wouldn't know, would you?" Silence. Sharp, cruel, heavy. Laughter. Not from everyone. But enough. Enough to slice through her. Clare stood frozen. Her throat clenched. Her eyes stung. But she wouldn't let the tears fall here. Not here. I mean, some women wait a little too long, don't they? Lila added, feigning innocence, twirling her diamond bracelet. Time waits for no one. More laughter. Murmured agreement. Daniel still beside her, eyes fixed ahead, jaw tightening. But he said nothing. Not yet. Clare looked out over the crowd. their perfect dresses, their mocking eyes, their polished cruelty hidden in smiles. Her lip trembled. She took one step back. Her heel caught on the edge of the carpet. She stumbled. Gasps. Laughter. A hand clapped. Claire hit the marble floor with a soft, humiliating thud. Her glass shattered beside her, sparkling like a million stars around her knees. Her hand scraped the polished stone. The room exhaled, a mixture of shock and silent glee. "She fell," someone whispered, stifling a chuckle. "She's shaking." "Poor thing. Maybe it's the hormones." Claire didn't move. The sting in her palms was nothing compared to the roar in her ears. Her eyes blurred. The humiliation, the years of silence, the night she cried quietly while holding baby socks she never got to use. It all surged up, raw and red and aching. And still, no one helped her up until a single pair of polished black shoes stepped into view. Daniel. But this time, his face wasn't calm. His hands clenched at his sides. His brows furrowed deep. There was something different in his eyes. Not shame. Claire stood slowly. Her knees stung from the fall. Tiny shards of glass clung to the hem of her dress like bitter confetti. Her fingers trembled, but she didn't cry. Not yet. She brushed her palms against her skirt, took a breath, shallow, tight, and willed herself to look up. Everyone was watching. Pretending not to, but watching. Lila smirked from across the room, sipping her wine with the smugness of someone who had thrown the stone and was now admiring the ripples. Daniel reached out to steady Claire. She didn't take his hand, not because she was angry, but because if she did, she might crumble. "I'm fine," she whispered. Her voice was barely audible, but her eyes said something else. "Please don't let me fall again." Daniel opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, a child's voice pierced the tense air. "Hi, lady. Want to see my car?" Claire blinked. A little boy, maybe 4 or 5, stood at her side. He had dark curls and eyes too big for his tiny face. He was holding a small toy Lamborghini in one hand, and his other was stretched toward her, eager, trusting. Her heart cracked open. She crouched gently, ignoring the ache in her legs, and smiled to the tightness in her throat. "Is it fast?" she asked softly, brushing a glass shard from his sleeve. He nodded proudly. "The fastest. Look." He pushed it across the floor with a giggle, and it zoomed past the table leg. Claire clapped lightly, warmth blooming in her chest. Something real, something soft. She laughed, not forced, not for the crowd. Just real. And then, "Excuse me." A woman stormed toward them, stilettos clicking like knives. She was tall, sharp-cheeked, wearing a white satin dress that screamed wealth and war. Her eyes locked onto Claire like a sniper. "That's my son." Claire stood, startled. "I was just—" The woman stepped between them, grabbing the boy's arm with a perfectly manicured hand. "You don't need to touch him." The boy frowned. "Mommy, go play over there, Liam." He hesitated. "But I like her." "Now," she said. "Ice." Steel. No room for affection. He sulked off. The woman turned back to Claire with a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "Nothing personal," she said, voice low but razor sharp. "But not everyone is comfortable with strangers getting too close to their children." Claire blinked. "I wasn't." "I'm sure you meant well," she interrupted, tone syrupy. "But you don't understand. Mothers are protective, especially when we've been through the real things. The late nights, the diapers, the hospital visits." Her smile widened. "You wouldn't understand." The words hit harder than the fall. The whispers reignited around the room like a fire, catching wind. "She probably shouldn't even be here. Awkward, isn't it? She makes everyone uncomfortable." Claire's breath caught. Her chest felt tight, like someone had wrapped their fingers around her lungs. Her eyes darted to Daniel, still watching, still silent. "No, please say something. Please." But he didn't. His jaw was clenched, his shoulders stiff. But he hadn't moved. And that silence, it screamed louder than anything else. Claire turned, one slow step after another, until she reached the far corner of the room. away from the chandeliers, away from the stairs. She stood behind a curtain near the grand piano, hidden, breathing in gasps, her back pressed to the wall. She thought of the baby names she used to scribble in her journal, of the nursery she painted pale yellow 5 years ago and had since locked away, of the doctor's voice that had said, too kindly, I'm so sorry. There's nothing more we can do. She thought of all the women who didn't know that story, who didn't care, who saw her as less, empty, worthless, and still Daniel stood there, not defending her, not even looking for her. But then a sudden scrape of the microphone echoed through the speakers. The crowd quieted. Daniel had stepped onto the stage, and for the first time that night, his hands weren't in his pockets. They were gripping the microphone like a man trying to steady himself from an earthquake. His voice cracked through the silence. I wasn't going to say anything. The crowd stilled. I thought I could smile and move past it, laugh along with you, pretend I didn't hear the comments, the laughter when my wife fell, the jokes about her not having children, the whispers behind her back. Every eye locked on him, but I did hear them. His voice was firmer now, angrier, sharper. I heard every single word. A shift in the room. People exchanged glances, uncomfortable. And I stayed quiet, he said, shaking his head, because I didn't want to embarrass her or ruin your party. But you already did that with your cruelty, your judgment, your arrogance. He stepped closer to the edge of the stage. You looked at the love of my life and saw weakness. But I see someone who wakes up every day and carries grief like armor, who has held my hand during every test, every doctor's appointment, every loss, who painted a nursery we never used and still smiles at children like they're magic. Claire, from behind the curtain, covered her mouth. Her legs nearly gave out. Daniel's voice cracked. You think she's less because she can't be a mother? Let me tell you something. Claire has more maternal grace in one moment of kindness than half of you will in a lifetime of having kids you hand off to nannies. A gasp. Lila choked on her wine. Daniel's eyes burned. She didn't fall tonight. You pushed her, and even then she got back up, with grace, with dignity, and still had enough heart to make a little boy smile. He paused. Don't you ever, ever mistake quiet for weak. The room was frozen, airless, and then Claire stepped out from behind the curtain, eyes glossy, lips trembling, but her back was straight, her head high. Daniel turned, saw her, and everything in his face softened. He dropped the mic onto the stage with a thud and met her halfway. He took her hand and kissed it. Her heart melted. He laid the blanket out by the lake and poured her a cup of hot tea, her favorite, chamomile, always chamomile. They sat side by side. No noise, no party, no cruel laughter, just the breeze, the trees, the sound of the water brushing against the rocks. Claire looked at him. You knew, she whispered. Didn't you? That tonight would be hard. I did, he said, but I didn't know how cruel they'd be. I didn't know how strong you'd be. She laughed softly, sadly. I didn't feel strong. You were, he said, his eyes locking onto hers. You are. They tried to break you, and you still smiled at a child, still showed kindness. That's strength, Claire. That's heart. That's motherhood, whether they see it or not. Her breath hitched. She rested her head on his shoulder, and for the first time in a long, long time, she felt whole. Not because someone handed her a baby, not because the world approved of her, but because the man she loved, the only one who truly saw her, chose her, defended her, cherished her, without conditions, without shame. Back at the party, Lila stood by the half-empty cake, jaw still tight, fingers still gripping a now-warm glass of champagne. Nobody was laughing anymore. The microphone Daniel had dropped still sat at the edge of the stage. And slowly, awkwardly, one by one, people began to murmur. That was powerful. I didn't know she'd been through all that. I feel terrible. They looked around, at each other, at themselves. Something had shifted. A woman named Claire, the one they dismiss as fragile, awkward, silent, had left the room without saying a word. But somehow she had said everything. And far away by the moonlit lake, Claire closed her eyes, her head against Daniel's shoulder, his arms wrapped around her. The world could be cruel, but love was louder. Love was stronger. And tonight, love had spoken.